Picture this scene. You opened a Vanguard account 3 years ago. You set up the automatic monthly transfer for $500. Every month for 36 months, that money came out of your checking on the same day, no exceptions, no skipping, no excuses. You did everything the personal finance books and the YouTube videos told you to do. And tonight, after the dishes are done and the dog is walked, you sit on the couch with your laptop and log in to check the balance. 18,000 of that money is yours. The total balance reads 19,000 and change. 3 years of doing the boring thing, and the market handed you $1,000. That works out to less than $30 a month. This is the moment most investors quit. Not because they stopped believing in compounding. They watched the videos. They saw the charts where a small acorn becomes a giant oak tree. They heard the famous Albert Einstein quote about compound interest being the eighth wonder of the world. They believed the concept intellectually. But staring at that screen, watching $500 a month produce almost nothing, the math starts to feel rigged. There is something compounding does to you that nobody warns you about. The growth curve doesn't sneak up on you. It hides from you. The first half of the chart looks like a gentle slope, almost flat against the bottom of the page. The second half looks like a wall going straight up to the sky. And the reason most people never get to that wall is because the slope at the beginning feels so disappointing, they walk away convinced the whole thing was a story sold to them by financial advisors who needed something to put in their newsletters. So today, I want to give you the rule that finally makes compounding click. A piece of math from the 17th century that fits on the back of a napkin in a coffee shop. Once you understand it, you stop measuring your money in dollars. You start measuring it in something else entirely. And the second you make that mental shift, the entire game changes. Let me start by showing you exactly why those first 3 years feel so empty. Because the math is actually doing what it's supposed to do. You just can't see it yet. Imagine 2 timelines for that same $500 a month at a 10% annual return, which is roughly what the S&P 500 has averaged over the last century, according to historical data through early 2026. In year 1, you contributed $6,000 of your own money. The market gave you about $300. Your total sits around $6,300. The market contributed 5% of the total growth that year. You did 95% of the work. By year 5, your contributions total $30,000. Your balance is around $38,000. The market has now given you $8,000 over those 5 years. That feels better, but you're still doing about 80% of the heavy lifting. By year 10, things start to shift. You've contributed $60,000. Your balance is roughly $103,000. The market has now produced $43,000 of growth, which is more money than you contributed in the first 7 years of the plan. Year 20 is when the relationship inverts entirely. You've contributed $120,000 over those 2 decades. Your balance is approximately $380,000. The market has produced $260,000 of that, more than double everything you've ever put in. And by year 30, the gap becomes almost embarrassing. You've contributed $180,000 of your own hard-earned money. Your balance is approximately $1.13 million. The market produced $950,000 of that. You did 16% of the work. Compound returns did the rest. This is why compounding feels so slow at the start, because in the front half of the curve, you genuinely are doing most of the work. The market is barely participating. Your contributions are the main driver of the balance. There's no compounding to celebrate yet because there's nothing to compound on. Compounding needs a stack to multiply. And in the early years, the stack is too small to matter. Now I want to show you the most famous illustration of this in mathematics because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Take a single penny, just 1 cent. Now imagine doubling that penny every single day for 30 days. Most people, when they hear this, picture a moderate pile of money at the end. Maybe a few $1,000s, maybe 10 or 20,000 if they're feeling generous. The actual answer at day 30 is over $5,300,000 from 1 penny. But here's the part that matters for our story. On day 15, the halfway point of the experiment, that penny had become approximately $164. Halfway through the doublings, you have 164 bucks. Not exactly retirement money. If you were the person doing this experiment and someone asked you at day 15 whether you were getting rich, you would have said no. The next 15 days produced $5,300,000 in change. The back half of the calendar created 33,000 times more wealth than the front half. This is not a math trick. This is what compounding actually does. The doublings get exponentially larger because they're multiplying against an exponentially larger base. And the most important sentence I'm going to give you in this entire video is this one. Every doubling is larger than all the doublings before it combined. That penny going from $16 on day 12 to $32 on day 13 added more wealth than every previous doubling stacked together. The 30,000 to 60,000 jump dwarfed the entire prior history. And the final doubling, from 2.6 million to 5.3 million, by itself produced more wealth than the previous 29 days combined. Your investment account behaves the same way. You just can't see it because you're standing inside the experiment, watching one day at a time, and the early days look pathetic. Now we get to the rule. The actual rule that makes all of this click in your head once and for all. It's called the Rule of 72, and it was first written down in detail by an Italian mathematician named Luca Pacioli in 1494, who described it in a book on commerce and arithmetic that merchants in Venice used to estimate how long their gold would take to double in value. He didn't invent compound interest. He just gave the world a shortcut for thinking about it. Here is the rule in full. Take the number 72. Divide it by your expected annual rate of return as a whole number, not a decimal. The answer is approximately the number of years it takes for your money to double. That's it. That's the whole rule. No spreadsheets, no calculators, no financial advisor required. Let me show you how it works with the real numbers you're dealing with in 2026. The S&P 500 has returned about 10.4% annually over the last 100 years, according to data through early 2026, with dividends reinvested. Divide 72 by 10 and you get 7.2. So roughly every 7 years, a dollar invested in a broad American index fund doubles in nominal terms. That's the rule applied to stocks. A high-yield savings account in 2026, at the time of recording, is paying roughly 4% annual percentage yield, with the best accounts hovering near 5% and the Federal Reserve's federal funds rate sitting in the 3.50 to 3.75 range as of the April 2026 meeting. Divide 72 by 4 and you get 18. Your money in a savings account doubles every 18 years. Not horrible, but you're going to wait almost 2 decades for it to happen. Inflation in the United States as of April 2026 was running at 3.8% year over year, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Apply the rule to inflation, which works in reverse because it's destroying your purchasing power, and 72 divided by 3.8 equals about 19. That means the purchasing power of every dollar sitting in a checking account gets cut in half in roughly 19 years at the current inflation pace. The dollar you have today is the 50 cents you'll have 19 years from now if you don't move it somewhere that grows. Now apply the rule to credit card debt, and this is where things get genuinely scary. The average credit card interest rate in the United States in 2026 is sitting at around 24% for revolving balances. 72 divided by 24 equals 3. Your credit card debt doubles every 3 years if you let it sit. A $5,000 balance becomes $10,000 in 3 years, $20,000 in 6 years, and $40,000 in 9 years, assuming you make no payments and the card stays open. This is why credit card companies print money. The rule cuts both ways. The same engine that builds wealth at 10% destroys you at 24%. Compounding is neutral. It doesn't care which direction it's working in. Now let me give you something to do with the rule, because the real magic isn't the calculation itself. The real magic is using it to draw the rest of your life on a piece of paper. Imagine a 30-year-old who has managed to save $10,000 in an investment account. They never add another penny, which is a hypothetical we'll relax in a moment, But for the sake of clarity, let's say they just leave it there in a low-cost index fund, earning the historical 10% average return. Using the rule of 72, their money doubles roughly every 7 years. So let's plot the doublings on a timeline. At age 30, the account holds $10,000. At age 37, it doubles to $20,000. At age 44, it doubles again to $40,000. At age 51, it hits $80,000. By age 58, the balance reaches $160,000. And by age 65, traditional retirement age, the account holds $320,000. That's 5 doublings between age 30 and 65. $10,000 became $320,000 without a single additional contribution. But look at where the wealth showed up. The jump from age 58 to age 65, the final doubling alone, added $160,000 to the account. The jump from age 51 to 58 added $80,000. The first 4 doublings combined, spanning 28 years of patience, added $150,000 total. The final 7 years of that account produced more wealth than the previous 28 years combined. This is the part that breaks people's brains. Because if you were that 30-year-old sitting at your kitchen table looking at your account at age 40, you'd see a balance of around $26,000 and feel like a complete failure. You've been investing for 10 years and you have $26,000 to show for it. The math from inside the experiment looks broken. But the math isn't broken. You're just early. The wealth lives in the right half of the graph, and you haven't gotten there yet. Warren Buffett's life is the single best illustration of this principle that has ever existed, and I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't walk you through it. Buffett bought his first stock at age 11. He was a millionaire by 30. By the time he turned 50 in 1980, his net worth was around $300 million, which is genuinely impressive, but represents a tiny sliver of his eventual fortune. According to data shared by Creative Planning in 2025, 98% of Buffett's net worth was accumulated after he turned 65. According to other estimates referenced by Morgan Housel in The Psychology of Money, 99% of Buffett's wealth came after he turned 50. As of recent figures, Buffett's net worth sits around $140 to $160 billion, depending on which day you check and how Berkshire Hathaway shares closed. Now here's the question that matters. Did Buffett become a better investor at age 50? Did he discover some secret formula? Did he start picking better stocks? He didn't. His returns were actually higher in the early decades, when his fund was smaller and he had more flexibility to take concentrated positions in obscure companies. His annual returns slowed as he got older, not sped up. The reason 99% of his wealth showed up after age 50 isn't that his investing skills suddenly multiplied. The reason is that his base had finally grown large enough for the doublings to matter. If Buffett had retired at 65, the world would never have heard of him. He would have been a wealthy regional investor in Omaha, Nebraska, known by people in his industry, but not on television. The reason he's a household name is because he stayed in the chair for another 29 years after most people his age were on cruise ships. Here's the part that should make you feel better, not worse, about being in your 20s or 30s or 40s right now. The reason Buffett built that wealth wasn't skill, it was time. Time is the only ingredient you can't manufacture or buy or borrow. It's the one resource a 25-year-old has more of than a billionaire. You don't need Buffett's brain, you just need his patience. Let me put some real 2026 numbers on this, so you can see exactly what compounding does inside a normal American retirement account at today's contribution limits. The IRS announced in November 2025 that the 401k employee contribution limit for 2026 is increased to $24,500, up from $23,500 in the previous year. The IRA contribution limit was raised to $7,500, up from $7,000. For workers aged 50 and over, the catch-up contribution to a 401k is now $8,000, which brings the total annual contribution ceiling for that group to $32,500. And under the Secure 2.0 Act, workers between the ages of 60 and 63 get access to a special enhanced catch-up of $11,250, which pushes their potential contribution to $35,750 per year. Those are the levers you have available in 2026. Let me show you what happens when you actually pull them. Imagine a 25-year-old who maxes out a Roth IRA at $7,500 per year, every single year until age 65. They invest in a broad index fund, earning the historical average 10% annual return. They never contribute to a 401k. Just the IRA, just the maximum, just patience. By age 65, that account holds approximately $3.6 million, from $7,500 a year. From a single account, most Americans either don't open or don't max out. Now imagine that same person waits until 35 to start. Same maximum contribution, same investment, same return assumption. By age 65, the account holds approximately $1.3 million. A 10-year delay cost them $2.3 million in retirement wealth. Wait until 45. Same plan, same returns, same discipline. By 65, the account holds approximately $430,000. A 20-year delay cost them $3.2 million. The math doesn't get gentler the longer you wait. The math gets more punishing. And if our 25-year-old also maxes out a 401k at $24,500 per year for the same 40-year window, the total retirement wealth crosses $15 million at the same 10% return assumption. That number sounds insane, but it's just math doing what math does when you give it 40 years to operate. I am not pretending this is easy. Maxing out both accounts means setting aside $32,000 a year before any matching, which is well above what most Americans can manage early in their careers. The point isn't that everyone should be hitting both ceilings at 25. The point is that the ceiling, when you can reach it, produces results that defy your intuition, because the back half doublings are doing the heavy lifting. If you've made it this far and you're starting to feel the math click in your head, hit subscribe. I cover this stuff every week on this channel, and there's a lot more where this came from. Now let me talk about the part of compounding that nobody wants to discuss, because it's the part that quietly destroys most people's plans before the back half of the curve ever arrives. Compounding has enemies, and those enemies are also using compounding against you. The first enemy is inflation, which I mentioned earlier, but it's worth coming back to. With current April 2026 year-over-year inflation running at 3.8%, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the purchasing power of every dollar you hold gets cut in half in roughly 19 years. That means the $1 million you accumulate in your retirement account isn't really $1 million when you spend it. It's the modern equivalent of about $500,000 if you retire in 19 years and inflation stays where it is. This is why parking your money in a savings account doesn't actually build wealth, it just slows the bleeding. The second enemy is fees. And fees are sneakier than inflation because they look small on paper, but they compound just like returns do. Let me show you what a 1% expense ratio does over 40 years versus an index fund with a fee of 0.05%, which is what the cheapest Vanguard and Fidelity funds charge in 2026. Imagine two investors, both contributing $7,500 per year into similar funds for 40 years. Both earn a 10% gross return. The first investor pays a 1% expense ratio, leaving them with a net return of 9%. The second investor pays a 5 basis point expense ratio, leaving them with a net return of 9.95%. The first investor ends up with approximately $2.5 million. The second investor ends up with approximately $3.5 million. That 1% fee, which sounds small in a brochure, cost the first investor $1 million over 40 years. The fee didn't take 1% of their wealth, it took 28% of their wealth, because the fee compounded against them the same way the returns compounded for them. This is why low-cost index funds aren't just a recommendation, they're a defense mechanism. Every basis point you pay in fees is a basis point that doesn't double in your account. The third enemy is what researchers call the behavior gap. This is the difference between what your investments returned on paper and what you actually earned because of when you bought and sold. Studies from Morningstar and Dalbar have shown that the average investor underperforms the funds they invest in by between 1 and 3% annually, depending on the year and the methodology. The reason isn't that the funds are tricking them. The reason is that humans buy high and sell low. When the market crashes, fear pushes investors to sell. When the market is at all-time highs, FOMO pushes them to buy. The behavior gap eats compounding from the inside. The fourth enemy is lifestyle inflation, which is the financial version of running on a treadmill. Every time you get a raise, your expenses creep up to match. The new salary feels great for about a month, and then it just feels like normal. The car gets nicer, the apartment gets bigger, the vacations cost more, and the money that was supposed to be the foundation for your future just becomes the floor of your present. Lifestyle inflation doesn't compound against you in the math sense, but it compounds in the behavioral sense because every dollar absorbed into your lifestyle is a dollar that never gets to start its doubling cycle. So here's where we are. The rule of 72 is real. The doublings are real. The math is real. But all of it depends on you actually staying in the game long enough to let it work. And the enemies of compounding are designed to get you out of the game. So how do you stay in it? How do you make the slow front half of the curve feel less like punishment and more like progress? Let me give you 4 practical reframes that will completely change how the early years feel. Number 1, stop tracking dollars. Start tracking doublings. This is the single most important mental shift I can give you in this entire video. When you log into your investment account, do not look at the dollar balance. Look at how far you are from your next doubling. If your account holds $8,000 and you're targeting a future balance of $16,000 as your next milestone, you're not measuring your progress in increments of $1. You're measuring it in increments of 1 milestone. And every doubling, no matter where you are on the curve, is the same percentage achievement as every other doubling. Going from 8,000 to 16,000 is the same kind of victory as going from 800,000 to 1.6 million. Mathematically, they are identical events. Emotionally, they are not. But the math doesn't care about your emotions. The math just cares about the percentage gain. When you start measuring in doublings, the early years stop feeling like you're standing still. You're achieving the same kind of milestone every 7 years that someone with a much larger account is achieving. You're just doing it with smaller numbers. Number 2, internalize Charlie Munger's most famous quote about wealth. Munger, Buffett's longtime business partner who passed away in late 2023 at age 99, was famously asked at a Berkshire meeting how an ordinary person could build wealth. He said, "The first $100,000 is a bitch. You've got to do it. I don't care what you have to do. If it means walking everywhere and not eating anything that wasn't purchased with a coupon, find a way to get your hands on $100,000. After that, you can ease off the gas a little bit." The reason Munger said this isn't because $100,000 is some magical number. The reason is that $100,000 is the point at which compounding starts noticeably contributing to your balance. At 10% annual return, $100,000 is producing $10,000 of growth per year, which is meaningful money. Below that threshold, your contributions still dominate the balance. Above that threshold, the market starts pulling its weight. The first $100,000 is the price of admission to the back half of the curve. Everyone has to pay it. There's no shortcut and no hack. The only path through is showing up consistently for long enough to cross the threshold. Number 3, reframe the boring years as the necessary years. There is a tendency in personal finance content, especially on YouTube and TikTok, to romanticize action. Buying a new stock, switching to a new strategy, discovering a new account, finding a new tax loophole. The whole genre is built around novelty because novelty is what gets clicks. But compounding doesn't reward novelty. Compounding rewards monotony. The investor who picks one boring index fund at age 25 and adds money to it every month until age 65 will outperform almost everyone who spent that same 4-decade window cleverly rotating between hot strategies. The boring years aren't the years where nothing is happening. The boring years are the years where the foundation is being laid for the doublings that haven't shown up yet. When you reframe the boring years this way, they stop feeling like wasted time. They feel like construction, like the months a contractor spends pouring concrete and running plumbing before any of the visible walls go up. From the outside, nothing seems to be happening for a long stretch. From the inside, the structure is being made possible. Number 4, build a system that doesn't require motivation. This is the practical layer underneath all the math. Because no matter how much you understand compounding intellectually, you will still have months where you don't feel like contributing. You will still have years where the market scares you. You will still have moments where pulling money out feels like the rational choice, even when it isn't. The way you defeat this is automation. Not willpower, not discipline, automation. Set up the automatic transfer on payday. Set up the automatic rebalancing. Set up the automatic dividend reinvestment. Remove the credit card from your investing app so you can't talk yourself out of contributing. Make the right behavior the default behavior and the wrong behavior the one that requires effort. The investor who relies on motivation to contribute every month will fail eventually because motivation isn't constant. The investor who built a system that contributes without their input will succeed even on the days they feel terrible. Compounding rewards consistency, and consistency is a function of systems, not feelings. If you do those 4 things, the front half of the curve stops feeling like punishment. It feels like preparation, because you finally understand what's actually happening underneath the boring monthly statements. Now here's the part I want to leave you with, because it's the most honest sentence I can give you about this entire topic. You can understand the rule of 72 perfectly. You can build the doublings table for your own life and tape it to your refrigerator. You can max out your IRA at $7,500 and your 401k at $24,500 for the next 40 years. You can run the math until you can recite the doubling intervals in your sleep, and you can still go broke. Because compounding is a multiplication function, and anything multiplied by 0 is 0. If you're carrying $20,000 in credit card debt at 24% interest while you're contributing to a Roth IRA returning 10%, the math is working against you. The debt is doubling every 3 years. The investments are doubling every 7. You're losing ground while feeling like you're winning. That's a foundation problem, not a returns problem. If you don't have an emergency fund and a market downturn forces you to liquidate your investments at the worst possible moment to cover a car repair, your compounding gets reset to 0. That's a foundation problem, not a strategy problem. If you don't understand how taxes work on the different account types, you could end up paying 20 or 30% of your gains to the IRS that you didn't need to pay. That's a foundation problem. If you don't have the basic financial vocabulary to read the documents your employer hands you on your first day, you might miss a 401k match worth thousands of dollars per year, which is the highest guaranteed return available to a regular American worker. That's a foundation problem. The math we walked through today is real. The doublings are real. The rule of 72 will work for you the same way it worked for Buffett, but the entire structure rests on something underneath it: the literacy, the foundation, the basic understanding of how money actually moves through an American household in 2026. That's the place where most financial journeys break before they ever get to the part where compounding starts to do its thing. And that's also why the place I always tell people to start, the absolute baseline before any of this advanced math becomes useful, is making sure the foundation is actually there. There's a video on this channel that walks through that exact starting point in full detail. The basics that nobody teaches in high school. The mistakes that quietly cancel out all the doubling tables in the world. The simple ideas that, once you have them locked in, make everything else we talked about today actually start working in your favor. Watch that one next if you haven't yet. Because the rule of 72 is a beautiful piece of math, but it only does its job when the rest of the house is built on solid ground. Compounding is patient. It will wait for you. The only thing it asks is that you give it something real to grow.